Heir finds grandma's trunk unaware. It buries a church's 30-year-old murders. The first thing out of Grandma Pearl's trunk was the smell-old cedar and damp paper, and the second thing was a newspaper clipping with my mother's name circled in red. Behind it lay a photograph of 5 black girls in white choir robes under a magnolia tree, each smile thin as a blade. Someone had drawn X's across 3 faces. When I turned the photo over, a single sentence had been penciled in a steady hand I recognized. They won't look for us because they know where we are. Outside, an engine idled a little too long on our quiet road, then rolled away. Before we get into the case file, just a quick note. If stories of hidden motives, dead ends, and unexpected turns are your thing, make sure you're subscribed. Hit the bell so the next mystery finds you first. Now, let's open the file. When Asha Grant returns from Atlanta to inherit her grandmother's crumbling house in Magnolia County, Mississippi, she expects mold, gossip, and a stack of utility bills. She doesn't expect a locked attic trunk stuffed with clippings about 3 missing black girls from the late 1970s cases the sheriff couldn't solve and the church forgot to mention. The clues point to Mount Olive Missionary Baptist, where Grandma Pearl sang alto in the choir, and where silence is a kind of prayer. As Asha pulls at threads, she crosses a retired black detective who never got to finish what he started, a pastor with a past, and the family secret she never asked to inherit. The deeper she digs, the more someone in town wants the dirt to swallow her whole. I arrived home 2 hours before the rain. Magnolia County was holding its breath the way it always did before a storm. The sky a long bruise stretching over cotton fields and pine stands. Grandma Pearl's house sat near the end of a road that used to be gravel in memory, and is now patchy asphalt trying hard to pretend it's progress. The place had sagged in the years since I left porch steps drooping, shutters cockeyed like tired eyelids. But the magnolia out front was stubborn as sign, glossy leaves and cream flowers, offering perfume and pity. I killed the engine, slid out, and felt the heat lean its weight on me. A cicada wound up a siren song. The key still on a crocheted keychain with my name spelled wrong. Ashy, because the lady at the flea market was sure she knew better stuck in the old lock. I had to bump the door with my hip to get it open. Like the house and I were reintroducing ourselves with a shoulder check. The hallway was the same. Plastic runner still protecting the faded rug from a mess that would never come. Framed church programs and baby photos making a timeline that stopped 2 years ago when Grandma's breath did. The air inside carried the memory of fried catfish and white shoulders perfume, and underneath both, the persistent damp of a house built before air conditioning was a birthright. Hello? I called because I am the kind of woman who talks to empty rooms. The emptiness didn't answer. The coming rain did a low, distant growl. I dumped my bag on the sofa and flipped on the box fan. It coughed up dust that tasted like coins. I opened windows. Let the hum of cicadas and a distant lawnmower ride in. The trunk found me. I wasn't looking for anything except the breaker box. Half the outlets were dead, and I climbed into the attic because Grandma's notes said, "Ascend, main fuse." The stairs protested every self-conscious pound. I pushed open the hatch into heat that felt personal. The attic was a low wedge of dark, crowded with baby clothes, a broken fan, a tower of yellowed Jet magazines. And against the far wall, half buried under blankets and a quilt I recognized from my childhood naps, sat the trunk. It wasn't even fancy. Faded army green, dented near the corner, brass lashes dull with time. On the lid, someone had stuck a strip of masking tape and written, "Pearls do not touch." Obviously, that had worked out great. I stood there longer than I needed to, because that's how grief sneaks up on you. Not as tears, but as weight, as if your lungs borrowed somebody else's air. Pearl had raised me from 11 on, after my mother ran north and my father ran off. This trunk had lived in the corner of the attic my whole childhood. I'd never seen it open. "Okay," I said to the heat. "Okay." The latches resisted, and then gave with a noise that sounded like a throat clearing. Cedar and paper. Under a folded quilt, a shoebox. Inside the shoebox, envelopes held together with a rubber band fossilized to amber. Beneath that, a stack of newspapers folded precisely. Dates visible like grave markers. 1976, 1978, 1980. The clipping with my mother's name circled lay on top. The headline was dull and unhelpful local choir host's fundraiser, and the photograph beneath it caught my mother by accident. Off to the side, 17 with a braid down her back, and that expression she wore when she thought the world was a kind of dare. The red pen's circle found her face like a scope. "Why?" I whispered, like paper could answer. A horn sounded far away. The attic wood creaked as if settling. I reached for the stack beneath and felt the edges cut my finger. A clean, petty sting. The next clipping made my mouth go dry. Third teen reported missing authorities seek tips. The missing girl's photograph was school portrait awkward. A hint of braces, hair pressed and parted, eyes that met the lens without permission. Cora Jean Whitaker, 14, last seen leaving Mount Olive Missionary Baptist Church's youth choir rehearsal, June 12, 1978. I knew that name. Everyone did, if everyone meant folks who stayed long enough to know the potholes by texture. Cora Jean was a ghost story in youth group to make girls text their mamas. She was a cautionary tale told by aunties who stressed the skirts and not the men. She was a prayer list with no end. I hadn't known she was connected to Mount Olive. Another clipping, another girl. Lorraine Lola Sims, 16, disappeared August 3rd, 1977, between the parsonage and the corner store. And another Mary Alice Dorsey, 15, missing since 1976, a pattern cut out of lives in newsprint. My scalp prickled like someone whispered behind my neck. Under the clippings was a photograph of 5 girls under a magnolia tree in white choir robes. The same tree out front, a younger version of those limbs like reaching hands. They had that end of rehearsal slump, but were still posed by the grown-up with the camera. 3 thin red X's marked 3 faces. On the back, that sentence, "They won't look for us because they know where we are." I traced the handwriting, round loops, sensible pressure. Pearl wrote like she talked decidedly, no more space than needed. My phone vibrated in my pocket, scaring me like a child. A number I didn't have saved. I let it go to voicemail because I have healthy boundaries, and also because the attic heat was building a headache behind my eyes. I rifled deeper, past a worn church fan with Martin Luther King Jr.'s face, past a Mount Olive program from 1979, past a Polaroid of Pearl and Deaconess Ruthie May holding pies like trophies. At the bottom sat a spiral notebook with a cover bowed by use. I knew it immediately because Pearl had never met a day she didn't plan for. A ledger. The first lines were the neat columns of grocery lists and light bill payments and church bake sale tallies. Then, halfway down a page, the ledger abandoned numbers for a name, Cora Jean. I sat cross-legged on the attic floor, sweat sticking my shirt to my back, and read my grandmother's careful observations as thunder rolled in like a reminder. June 5, 1978 sang, "His eye is on the sparrow." Cora Jean had solo. "Girl is precious." After, Pastor Avery let the boys stack chairs, told girls to mind their smiles. I don't like it when men talk like that, but who am I? June 12th, Cora Jean's mama says she ain't come home. Sheriff says maybe she run off to Jackson. Told her girls do that. Don't you know? I know girls. Mine wouldn't run off in them Sunday shoes. Wrote down license plates I saw parked behind Fellowship Hall late. Might be something, might be nothing. Can't trust men to look for girls who belong to us. 3 plate numbers followed, written with the quiet intensity of someone making a map no one had asked for. The attic bulb flickered as the storm arrived all at once. Rain hit the roof in a hard wave. Somewhere on the street, an engine revved, then settled, then idled like a man who didn't mind waiting. I set the ledger down, wiped the sweat off my lip, closed the trunk, forgot about the breakers. Down in the living room, the fan had knocked a little heat off the air. I let the rain soundtrack the rest, the way it goes from assault to comfort once the initial roar passes, the way it turns the yard to a glistening mess. My phone chimed with the voicemail. I listened with one thumb hovering, as if I could erase a voice mid-breath. Ms. Grant? This is Olivia Price at the Magnolia County Courthouse. Your appointment for probate tomorrow is confirmed at 10. I know you're grieving. I lost my grandma too. I also wanted to say, watch your step with that house. Folks remember Pearl, most of them in a good way. Some of them in a way they keep to themselves. The call ended on the click of a thought withdrawn. Lightning stitched the yard white, and then darker than before. I looked at the ceiling like I might see through to the attic and know where to put the ledger so nobody but me could find it. A car went by slow, the kind of slow that pronounces itself, the kind that reads your soul through your curtains. I didn't move until the taillights passed the Magnolia and disappeared into rain. Morning brought fried egg sunlight and 100 degrees. The storm scrubbed it away, and the air somehow heavier for it. I wore a black dress to the courthouse because grief plus heat equals softness, and I wanted to feel like a blade. The probate office was a rectangle of beige, a no-smoking sign tacked up as if to remind you there used to be a time for everything, and a young white clerk with damp hair and acrylics tapping her keyboard like it owed her money. Name? She asked, without looking up. Asha Grant. She found me in the system and then found my face. From the Pearl House, she said, a statement colored like a question. My mama went to Mount Olive when she was little. That's so, I said, which is what you say when you don't know what someone wants from the fact of your grandmother. A framed picture of the Magnolia County Sheriff's Department hung crooked behind her. Men with arms crossed and smiles that stopped at their teeth. Ms. Price will be right with you, the clerk said, and slid a pen at me, like I might steal something if my hands weren't busy. Olivia Price came out of an inner office with the competence of a woman who had never needed to raise her voice to be heard. She was early 40s, black, hair cropped close, a navy dress that meant she'd anticipated battle but hoped for routine. She shook my hand and looked me in the eye as if to take inventory and not to warn. Miss Grant, I'm sorry for your loss. Thank you. We sat at her desk. She went over the papers with patience, pointed to lines needing signatures, answered my questions without making me feel like I should have done more Googling. She had a silver wing shaped like a little magnolia bloom. When I glanced at it, she said, My grandmother's, and we both smiled as if we belonged to a club that wasn't exclusive, but felt that way. And about the house, Olivia said, underlining a line with her nail, Magnolia Lane taxes are sticky. Your grandma kept up as best she could. I can help get you on a payment plan. I nodded. I'm staying for a while. Fix it up. Get the porch, right? She looked like she wanted to say more, but chose not to. If you need a plumber, call Jared at Kane Mechanical. If you need electricity, pray. And if you need to not go by Mount Olive for a little while, that's your business. It was the way she said it, like someone who touched something hot and didn't want you to. Did you know Pearl? I asked. She smiled into the memory, small. She stood up in choir 40 years and never missed a note. The smile flattened. She also kept records. Her eyes flicked to my face and then away. You doing okay there on that road? Folks drive too fast. And too slow. Someone idled outside last night, I said before I could decide whether to say it. Probably nothing. Probably, she agreed, in the voice of someone who had boxed up too many probablys for grieving people. On my way out, A deputy coming in brushed my shoulder too close and said, "Smile, sweetheart. It ain't that bad." He was white and mediocre and sweat-shiny. He didn't stop moving as he said it. He didn't need to. I smiled at the ceiling so I wouldn't chop him with words and give him a story to tell. Outside in the square, an old man was selling boiled peanuts from a dented cart Harlan Hawk Jefferson, who had been old when I was little and seemed to have found a way to make staying put into magic. "Pearl's girl," he said, touching 2 fingers to his cap brim. "Got your grandma's eyes. Softer mouth, though. I bought a bag of peanuts and the right to gossip. You still sing?" I asked. "Only to the Lord," he said, "and only when he asks." He squinted past me, toward the courthouse doors. "Listen, you going to Mount Olive? Sunday, probably?" He worked a peanut free with a thumb and knuckle, like pulling truth out of a lie. "Don't go alone," he said, then smiled to soften it. "Not that you can't handle yourself. Just," his gaze drifted toward where the river curled south. "People got long memories and short patience. You sound like Olivia. Olivia got good sense." He slid a folded index card to me like a dealer. "Zeke Darden, retired detective. Didn't retire in his heart. Lives over on Cyprus. He helped folks when folks wanted help. He tried to help when they didn't." I put the card in my dress pocket and told myself I wouldn't use it. I left with peanuts and heat trapped under my hairline. On the other side of the square, a woman selling pecan pralines called out, "Pearl's baby, come see me after church." And I thought of how this town loved you with its memory, right up until it killed you with the same. The house greeted me like it had spent the morning practicing what to say. I made sweet tea because the day demanded ceremony. I pulled the ledger from where I'd hidden it, the cavity behind the bookshelf in the hallway where Pearl kept her hoarded wrapping paper, my secret as a kid, and read until I couldn't pretend I was doing anything else. Pearl had kept better records than the sheriff. License plates, makes of cars, first names murmured in kitchens. Little details that made a picture if you stepped back. Pastor Avery's brother Lonnie, who kept wanting to help where girls ain't asked. A deacon who drove a blue Chevrolet with a bad muffler and liked choir practice nights too much. A boy named Mason, who was sweet on Cora Jean but scared of his own shadow. A list of dates the girls were seen, the nights the church held lock-ins, who took the last slice of pound cake at the bake sale. It read like a lamentation disguised as housekeeping. Then, sheriff says they run. Lola had a boy. Mary Alice wanted to see the world. Cora Jean fell in with fast friends. These men got language to cover their sins. If the girls were white, it would be drag the river and not drag they names. Deaconess says I should let it go. "Pearl, you got a daughter to raise?" I tell her, that girl of mine gone, and that's part of the reason a thing like this can happen. I paused with the sting of that sentence filling my ribs from the inside. My mother had left at 19 with a man in a car with plates from Tennessee. Every fight Grandma and I ever had lived in the shadow of that departure. I ran a finger along Pearl's words as if I could pet the ache down. The ledger turned messy at the end. Dementia had crept into her script, stealing curves from letters, flattening the words without mercy. But the last clean entry was dated 12 years ago, and it was a name, Ezekiel Darden. Beneath it, a note. He listens. I got in my car before I could overthink it. Cypress Street was a strip of mid-century brick bungalows and shade trees that shivered even when the air did not. I found the number on Hawk's card, painted in flaking white on a mailbox shaped like a fish. The porch held 2 metal chairs, a cooler, and the kind of silence that lets you hear your own bones. The man who opened the door had the steady eyes of someone you instinctively tell the truth to. Late 60s, skin the color of wet walnut, gray hair clipped close, a scar nicking his left eyebrow like punctuation. He looked at me and looked at what I was carrying, Pearl's ledger, a bag of boiled peanuts, and smiled with half his mouth like an old habit. "You got Pearl's walk," he said, and I realized maybe I did. Shoulders back, chin set like a prayer you don't want to say out loud. "I'm Asha," I said, "her granddaughter." "I know who you are," he said, which is the way small towns make a party of your business. He let me in without asking. His living room had a fan working overtime and a wall of framed photographs of women in white robes, men in black suits, children in Sunday best, the river in winter, the same Magnolia outside my house in a younger glory. He poured sweet tea into mason jars like his hands remembered before his mind did. Pearl and I, we tried. "To find them?" I asked. "To make someone care?" He nodded toward the ledger like it was a relic. She kept notes. I kept knocking on doors. Sheriff Carlisle told us we were stirring up sorrow. The church told us to lean on faith. He shrugged. "Faith is good. It just don't fetch the girls home by itself." We ate peanuts and let the shells pile on a folded section of the Magnolia Times. Zeke asked about Atlanta, and I told him about my job designing apps for people who would rather count steps than feelings, about my ex who left me a dog and took the good cast-iron skillet, about how grief pitched a tent in my chest and refused to leave. He listened like someone who had learned to find relevant data inside grief's noise. "I found 3 plate numbers in Pearl's book," I said finally. "She wrote them down the night Cora Jean went missing." "You ever rung them?" He smiled with the humorless tenderness of a man who had learned both his reach and his limits. "I ran everything she gave me. Twice. The numbers were clean. Or they were dirty in ways that didn't stick. 2 belonged to good husbands with bad timing. 1 to Lonnie Avery." "Pastor's brother," I said. "That one." Zeke leaned back. "Lonnie was a deacon then. Some men wear titles like armor. Some wear them like a pass." He looked at me like a doctor does when he's rehearsed a speech about bad news and also knows you know already. "He died in '82 in a wreck." That was a convenient way to close the chapter for some folks. "Was he? Did you?" "I never had proof," he said. "Proof is a luxury in a town where your word weighs less than a man's reputation." I had whispers from girls who grew up and left and blocked Magnolia County on their map. I had a janitor who saw Lonnie and Cora Jean ride home the night she went missing and then changed his story when the pastor came knocking. I had a former deacon who asked me why I cared about loose girls. Zeke's mouth went hard. Loose is a word men use to wrap around a woman so they can hold on to her without admitting what they're doing. Pearl wrote, "They won't look for us because they know where we are," I said, feeling the sentence settle in the room like a second ceiling. Zeke nodded as if the words were familiar. Pearl wrote those clippings as if they were petitions to a court that wasn't real. "I want to finish what she started," I said, and the room went quiet in that specific way rooms do when you've said something you can't take back. "You ready to be disliked?" Zeke asked. "By people who think they are good?" "I'm black and a woman, and back in a town that remembers me as a mouthy teenager," I said. "Disliked is Tuesday." He smiled with half his mouth again, and seemed to like me then, or like that I was honest. "Start with women," he said. "Men won't tell you the truth until it benefits them. Women will tell you the truth when they trust you to put it where it belongs." He wrote down 3 names and 2 addresses. Deaconess Ruthie Mae Ellis, who now ran the church kitchen like a military campaign. Laverne Carlisle, the sheriff's widow. And Naomi Whitaker, Cora Jean's sister, who'd been 12 when her sibling vanished and now owned a hair salon near the highway. "Tell Ruthie Mae Zeke sent you," he said. "Tell Laverne I said hi, and then duck." "Naomi," he considered. "Naomi has been holding her breath 30 years. Let her exhale at her own pace." "What about Pastor Avery?" I asked. Zeke's eyes changed a little, like a cloud crossing. "He's retired. His son Lionel's the pastor now. Lionel is not his daddy, but he grew up inside the same walls." He stood up, took my empty jar, refilled it. Don't go to the church alone. I keep hearing that. Because it's true, he said, and then he changed the subject to my porch, whether I planned to paint it or strip it and stain. That's Southern conversation 2 warning, tucked inside hospitality. On my way out, he stopped me. People like to talk about evil like it's dramatic. Black cape, red eyes. Sometimes evil is a man with a ring of keys who says he'll walk you to your mama's car. The heat hit me like a soft slap. The magnolia leaves flashed green coins in the sun. I put his note in my pocket and considered whether I was brave or foolish or both. The answer ringed my throat like sweat. Ruthie Mo Elis met me in the Mount Olive kitchen with a ladle in her hand and suspicion in her eyebrows. She was sturdy and beautiful in the way of a woman who had carried heavy things most of her life and chosen not to set down the capacity. The kitchen smelled like fried chicken and lemon cleaner. A line of aluminum pans marched on a folding table, casseroles under foil ready for some grieving family I hadn't heard about yet. "Zeke sent you," she said, which is what you say when you've already decided to let someone in. She handed me an apron. "You can stir this gravy while you ask whatever you're going to ask." I stirred. She watched the door and then me. The fellowship hall outside echoed with children's laughter and the squeak of shoes on linoleum. A fluorescent light in the corner flickered like it was about to tell the truth. "I found Pearl's notes," I said. "On the girls." A lot of words moved behind Ruthie Mae's face before any came out. "I told Pearl to let it go," she said finally. "That don't mean I wanted it to stay gone. It means I wanted her to live." She crossed to the sink, washed her hands as if earnestly scrubbing something off. "Men in this town don't like being watched." Pearl watched. It's why they loved her singing and tolerated her mouth. "What do you remember?" I asked. "Mary Alice and Lola were older than me," she said. "I remember them teaching the little girls the hand claps to Down by the Riverside. I remember them stealing extra cookies from the kitchen when Deacon Carter stepped out to smoke. I remember Mary Alice's laugh had an echo to it like she was harmonizing with God. And I remember men acted like girls. Bodies were public domain, and that was called normal." She turned down the flame under the gravy. "I remember Lonnie's eyes. I remember the way he smiled and how something behind it didn't move." "Did anybody ever go to the police?" I asked. "Really go?" "Naomi did." Ruthie Mae dried her hands on a towel that had seen things. "Pearl did. They were told to mind their homes, and not the devil. The devil minded the homes just fine." The fellowship hall door swung open, and a man's voice filled the kitchen before he did. "You hiding back here, Ruthie Mae? I can smell chicken all the way from the pastor's office." Lionel Avery stepped in with a grin he must have practiced in the mirror, the confident walk of a man inherited, not earned. 45, maybe, expensive watch, clerical collar loose under an open collar shirt because casual church was in season. He saw me and did what men do, recalibrated. "Now," he said, "you look familiar." "Asha Grant," I said, keeping my voice level even as my heart did its thing. "Pearl's granddaughter." "Ah." He pressed a hand to his chest like he'd been given a gift and not a challenge. "We lost a soldier when we lost Pearl. A general, more like. Are you settling back in?" "I'm settling," I said. He looked at the gravy, at the chicken, at Ruthie Mae, like he owned all of it and also liked to share. "You know we'd love to see you Sunday," he said. "We're starting a new series on forgiveness." Ruthie Mae's mouth twitched. I smiled with my lips tight. "Forgiveness is a big theme," I said. "So is justice." His eyes flicked to mine with interest that might have been warning. "Justice is the Lord's," he said, a sentence employed most often to keep a woman's jaw from setting. "We try not to get ahead of him." "Sometimes he sends scouts," I said, and he laughed, pleased with the sparring. He left with 2 drumsticks and a napkin, calling over his shoulder, "Y'all don't get too hot back here. and the door swung behind him. The fluorescent light flickered again, like an aimant that had nowhere to go. "He's not his daddy," Ruthie Mae said when the door closed. "He's not Lonnie. But he is what the church makes a man who believes in his access." I finished stirring the gravy. She tasted it with a metal spoon, nodded, and poured it into a waiting pan. "You go talk to Naomi," she said. "And if you see Laverne Carlyle, tell her time got the jump on all of us. She know what I mean." Naomi Whitaker's salon sat where Highway 7 smoothed out and let you exhale. The bell over the door announced me to a room of women who had arranged their afternoons for hair and truth. The air smelled like coconut oil and heat. Naomi stood in a black smock with scissors in one hand and a comb in the other, a woman consulting a map she'd drawn over 30 years and never gotten lost on. Her hair was a short natural with gray at the temples like deliberate design. When she saw me, her face performed the complicated math of deciding if she had space for me today. "You Pearl's grandbaby," she said, which in Magnolia County is also how you answer the phone. "Yes, ma'am," I said. "I'm Asha." She looked at the ledger under my arm. Something moved across her eyes, like lightning behind clouds. Then she flipped the smock on her current client and said, "Take a seat. I'll be with you when I got 2 hands." I sat. The women in the chairs and under dryers watched me with the affectionate suspicion black women reserve for returns. The local radio station played Al Green low like prayer. When Naomi finished, she waved me into her chair-first seat by the window, which is both strategic and a message. "You here to make things worse?" she asked, without heat. "I'm here because Pearl wanted to make them better," I said. Honesty made a sound in the room like a curl snapping free from a roller. Naomi draped the cape around me because habit runs faster than narrative. She sprayed water on hair. I'd slicked into a bun for the heat, and I felt the cool like blessing. "You look like your mama around the eyes," she said. "I heard that once already today." Women in this town keep track of the shapes we've seen walk down Main. She set the spray bottle on the tray. "What do you want to know, Asha?" "What you saw," I said. "What you are not allowed to say." She pressed her lips together and nodded like she'd given herself the same instructions years ago, and taped them to the mirror. I was 12 when Cora left and didn't come back. She was 14. Mama kept her hair braided tight and her name tighter. Cora wasn't wild. She was electric. That scares people more. Naomi's hand found the comb without looking. I watched Lonnie watch girls. He did it like he was reading a ledger God had given him. I told Mama, and she told me to stick to the sunlight and not be alone. Church had lots of sunlight in it, and also lots of corners. "Did you see him with her?" I asked. Naomi's reflection blinked. I saw him close. I saw him at the back door after rehearsal, and then I saw him again in the parking lot, where the lights go out if you don't jiggle the switch right. I went to Sheriff Carlyle, and he told me sometimes girls run. "Lonnie died in '82, I said. "Did that quiet folks down?" Naomi's laugh cut its way out like a blade. "Death is a curtain people hide behind when they're tired." She set down the comb hard enough to make the tray ring, and it was easier to hang it on a dead man than to ask the living what they knew. She reached into her drawer and pulled out a small, scratched cassette tape in a cracked plastic case. She set it on my lap, not dramatic, but with a rhythm that understood what sound objects make. "What is it?" I asked. "Cora singing," she said, and she sighed. And a conversation I recorded over years when folks thought I was playing with my Gaddy's tape recorder. The choir room, a door. Men who didn't press their voices down because they think the walls hold their secrets like communion. Something in her eyes went soft and then hard again. I gave a copy to Pearl. She brought it to Zeke. Zeke brought it to the Day. The Day brought it to his trash can. Heat rose under my skin. "Can I?" "You can listen," she said, "but you can't get me hurt worse than I already been hurt." She glanced at the women under the dryers, at the corner where a busted flat iron sat like a memorial. Men leave marks on a life that look like regular wear if you squint. I won't need to squint, I said, and she heard something in my voice she must have recognized because she nodded. If you want hair, I'll do it, she said, the corner of her mouth quirking. But you didn't come for hair, baby. I came for truth, I said. Truth is a style people don't think they can pull off, Naomi said, and we both laughed. Then she leaned in, close enough that her whisper warmed my ear. Pearl got a call a month before she passed. A woman told her to stop asking where the girls went, because she was asking in the wrong place. What place? The river, Naomi said. We always think men put women in water. It's a story that feels biblical. But sometimes men don't like to visit their sin. Sometimes they pick places they were always going to go anyway. Church, I said, and the fluorescent light above the mirror flickered the way lights do when a building remembers what happened inside it. The tape rattled in my hand the whole drive home. I dug out my old boombox from the hall closet and set it on the kitchen table like a relic from a previous life. The plastic was cracked near the antenna. It hummed like it had opinions. I closed the windows to keep sound inside and secrets in their proper containers. The road outside went quiet in a way that wasn't peaceful. I pressed play. The hiss came first, a rush of ocean that belonged to cassette tape and time. And a voice, a young girl's, high and pure and sure. A hymn I knew from my childhood, but couldn't have named if you'd paid me. The words gathered in the kitchen like sunlight. The voice was Cora's. I didn't know how I knew, but I did. It reached ribs I had not known were shut. After the hymn, the hiss again. Muffled footsteps. A door. Then voices low but clear, the way men talk when walls are their friends. One voice I didn't recognize, and one I thought I did, but couldn't place. Told you to switch the lock, the first voice said, irritation under the syllables. Lionel said he'd do it, the second voice said. A scrape of a chair or a mind changing direction. He's a good boy. Don't bring him into this. My breath stuck, then stuttered. Lionel was the son. Maybe they meant the father. Maybe my brain wanted shock because it needed fuel. I squeezed the edge of the table hard enough to leave crescents. We got to be careful with these girls, the first voice said. They seen things. People look at them. They only look when Pearl sings, the second voice said, with a humor that made something in my back go cold. The rest of the time, they call it mouthiness. A sound, a key in a lock. My spine knew the sound before my ears did. Then a third voice, closer to the recorder, familiar in the way your house smells when you come home from college and forget yourself. Pearl, younger than I ever knew her, saying low and fierce, I know what you're doing, and if you touch that child, I will set this church on fire and leave you to the Lord. Silence and then a laugh thin and unacceptable. Pearl, the first man said, and now I knew him. Lonnie Avery. I heard the smile in it. You think you the only one who can sing loud? The tape clicked and whirred like a heartbeat trying to work right. Then it stopped, as if it had decided I knew enough for now. I pressed eject with a shaking finger and sat in the quiet that was not quiet at all. Outside, a car idled. The same phrase as last night. The sort of sound you don't notice until you do, and then it is the only thing in the room with you. I stood slowly, walked to the window, lifted the curtain with 2 fingers, because movies taught me to. A white sedan I didn't recognize sat just beyond the mailbox, sun flashing off the windshield so I couldn't see inside. The Magnolia cast shade across the hood, making a dappled pattern like a sin made pretty. The engine ticked as if counting. The driver's hand lifted to adjust the rearview mirror. The car did not move. Okay, I said to the empty house, to Pearl's ledger on the table, to the cassette tape in its plastic coffin. Okay. I picked up my phone and typed a text to Zeke. They're watching my house. It felt both dramatic and insufficient in that way danger does. No one wants to believe you're the kind of person who merits surveillance. Then I gathered the ledger, the tape, Naomi's look, Ruthie Mae's warning, Olivia's voice on the phone. I placed the ledger back behind the bookshelf. I slid the tape into the flour canister, because I am my grandmother's granddaughter, and we use what we have. When I came back to the front room, the car outside was gone. I sat on the couch and let the fan blow hot air at my face like advice. I looked around for a dog that wasn't here anymore, and realized that was how grief works, too reaching for what you don't have like muscle memory in your hands. My phone buzzed. Zeke, door locked? Me. Yes. Zeke, don't open for anyone who says they from the church. Wait till I get there. I typed and erased 3 responses, each designed to make me sound braver. Then I typed, okay. I got up to lock the back door and saw what I should have seen earlier if I hadn't been a woman with a tape in her hand and denial in her blood. The back door's lock had been jimmied. The wood around the latch was splintered, the kind of fine splinters that settle like dust, not burst like fireworks. A man with a ring of keys wouldn't need to jimmy anything. A man who had learned to walk through this house when Pearl was alive would know where the soft spots were. I went very still. It's a thing city life teaches you, and country living remembers stillness, buys you a second to hear which way the danger is walking. The house didn't creak the way houses do when they are settling. It held its breath because I told it to. A footstep in the hallway, soft like a prayer. Another. I'm not a fool. I don't carry because Atlanta taught me pepper spray and keys between fingers in group chats with location sharing. The nearest weapon in reach was the cast iron skillet I'd bought myself after. Marcus left with Grandma's. I picked it up in both hands and felt the familiar yes of its weight. Ms. Grant? A man's voice, measured, not loud. The kind of voice that wants to sound official without paperwork. You home? Who is it? I called, pitching my voice flat. Somewhere in my mind, Pearl said, make a shape of yourself that nobody can draw around. Church, the voice said. Deacon Carter. We heard you was asking questions. Pastor Avery wants to welcome you back personally. I tightened my grip on the skillet. The back door stood open a sliver, like a mouth deciding between swallow and spit. Zeke's text blinked on my lock screen again, as if new. Leave, I said. Now. Silence long enough to make me think, for a cheap second, that I had told a man to do something and he'd done it, and the soft scrape of a shoe on tile. My kitchen, my kingdom. The edge of a laugh, the kind that never reaches the eyes. Ain't no call for ugliness, the voice said from the hall. We just want to make sure you're comfortable here. We'd hate for you to feel unsafe. Unsafe people do foolish things. I moved 2 steps to the left, the way you do to make a new angle in a room you know better than any man. I swung wide with the skillet when his shadow broke the doorway. The sound it made landed in the center of me like a punctuation mark. You made your grandma proud, he said, and the venom in the sentence arrived late, like a delayed train. He rolled, started to push himself up. I raised the skillet again, because solidarity with gravity is a hobby of mine. I'd stay down if I were you, Zeke said from the doorway behind me, and relief broke inside me so hard my knees got ideas. He stood with his hand inside his jacket, not a gun that I could see, but a man who remembered where it was when he had one. Deacon Carter, he said, voice steady like an old river. You tripped. The man on my kitchen floor smiled again, lips wet. That what we calling it. He started for the back door, rubbing the side of his head, dignity gathered like a coat. He paused with one hand on the knob, looked over his shoulder. Ask your mama about Alabama, he said to me. The door opened into glare. He was gone. I kept breathing until air felt like mine again. I set the skillet on the counter with more care than it deserved, because it had just saved me. Zeke put a hand on the counter, the other on his hip, not touching me because we were not family, and because he had learned how to be helpful without being presumptuous. "You see the lock?" I asked. "I see it," he said. He examined the splinters as if they could recall the exact sequence of force. He looked at the open back door, at the path across the yard between wilting hydrangeas. "You hit him clean," he said. "Pearl would have told you to go a little higher." He smiled that half-smile again. "I'm kidding." "Mostly." "What he said about my mama," I said, the words coming out like coins slid across a table. "Alabama." The tape in the flour canister felt like it was heating the room. I wanted to bake it into something and serve it on paper plates to the whole county. I wanted to listen again, and I wanted to never hear it. "We can go to the sheriff," I said, because hope is a muscle with an embarrassing memory. "Olivia knows people." Zeke smiled with the patience of a man who had attended this dance. "We can go to Olivia," he said. "We will go to Olivia. But the sheriff will tell us he can't act on a tape you got no chain of custody on, and a deacon with a bump on his head." "He broke in," I said, even though we both knew the difference between breaking and entering and letting yourself into a house that's always been yours to enter. "You saw the lock," Zeke said. "I saw the lock. The law will see a woman alone who hit a churchman with a skillet." He spread his hands. "We'll make a record. Sometimes records are all that save you." A hum rolled through the room, not mine, his. He pulled his phone, read something, then tucked it away. "Naomi texted me," he said. "Says the person you need to talk to is at the river before sunset. Says to stand by the old cypress roots and ask for Mason. Says not to bring a man." I looked at him. He lifted his hands in a showy surrender that left me with more choices than I wanted. "I can be around the bend," he said, a shout away and not in the picture. "I should go," I said, surprising myself most of all, "before the sun, before I change my mind and become the kind of woman who insists the walls keep secrets like they promised." We went together, which is to say we left together, and then separated on the gravel lot near the river, like people in a period drama who can't be seen in the same frame. He nodded toward the cypress stand upriver. I walked with the caution of a woman who wanted to keep her feet dry and her life. The Pearl River glided on its way to doing what rivers do, carrying things you put in them and telling no one about it. The cypress roots rose like knuckles. The air smelled like mud and forgiveness. I stood at the bend where the roots made a chair and said, feeling ridiculous and anointed, "Mason?" A figure detached from the shade, a man close to my age, maybe a little older, skin the color riverbank, wearing a faded Lakers t-shirt and a cap that said Bass Pro in letters that had seen better days. His eyes were like the river under a cloud steady and inscrutable until you knew where to look. "You Pearl's girl," he said. Everyone here had chosen my lineage so I could choose my voice. "Asha," I said. "Naomi said." "I know what Naomi said," he replied, and something in his face eased a degree, the way men's faces do when women say names they all agree belong to saints. He glanced past me to the trees where Zeke very conspicuously did not exist. "You came alone," he said, "which is different than unprotected." "You know about the girls," I said, and it wasn't a question because his posture had given it away. "I know what I saw," he said. "I know what I did, and I know what I didn't do soon enough." We stood in the brown gold light, insects scribbling messages in the air. He watched the river as if it might answer for him. When he spoke, his voice was careful, not like a liar's, but like a man who had discovered late in life the cost of imprecision. "Lonnie told me Cora needed a ride," he said. Said her mama asked him to make sure she got home safe. Lonnie had a way of making his lies sound like you would embarrass yourself by not believing them. He swallowed. I gave them both a ride once. After rehearsal. Dropped them at the edge of the road because Lonnie said he didn't want to make noise, parked out front. The next week he told me he had it, that I didn't need to worry. But I seen him leaning in her window in the parking lot. I seen him adjust his pants like a man who ain't ashamed of the body God gave him. Did you tell anyone? I asked, trying not to let the anger in my mouth shape the question into blame. I told Pearl, he said, because Pearl saw everything and made you think she hadn't. She told me to go to the sheriff. I didn't. I told myself I'd talk to her mama first. Then Cora didn't come home. He knelt and touched the water like it might carry his apology downstream. I wanted to take the blame because blame feels like action, he said. But blame don't put flesh back on bones. He looked at me then, and I hated how helpless I felt in front of the nakedness in a man's eyes. Lonnie had a key to the basement, he said. Had a lot of reasons. Fixing the AC, getting communion wine, moving old chairs. He liked the dark. My stomach turned over. You saying? I'm saying what Naomi already told you. Men like to put their sins in water, but sometimes they leave them where they worship. He looked back at the trees behind me, gauging how alone we were. After Lonnie died, the church sealed off part of the storage under the fellowship hall. Said it was mold. Said it was unsafe. He stood, the decision crossing his body like weather. I'll show you. You just don't bring that retired detective. Not yet. He lifted a hand when I started to speak. Not because he ain't good. Because I ain't ready to have my voice recorded in a man's notebook before I've given it to a woman. We walked along the river for a while, because some conversations require walking. The church rose up on the hill like a promise with terms and conditions. The fellowship hall sat behind it, a brick afterthought with a ramp for the old saints and a door with a new lock. Around the side, tucked where the groundskeeper's shed blocked the view from the parking lot, a metal door with rust at the bottom, and a sign that said, "Do not enter mold remediation." Mason produced a key from under his hat brim, because crime in small towns is often solved by knowing where folks hide things. He put it in the lock and paused, expectation ghosting his face. You can still walk away, he said. Go back to Atlanta. Let Pearl's songs be songs. If I walk away, I said, I take this door with me, and it will not fit in my car. He smiled once, a quick thing, then bent to the lock. The door stuck, then side open. Cool air breathed out, the kind that comes from concrete and old sorrow. The light switch did nothing. My phone's flashlight cut a thin path into the dark. The first thing I saw was an old upright piano, draped in a cloth that had collected a decade of dust. The second was stacks of folding chairs. The third was a section of wall that looked newer than the concrete around it. A rectangle where paint didn't match, a place where someone had patched and smoothed and pretended. I touched the seam. It flaked chalk beneath my finger. The flashlight made a small circle of brightness on concrete like a searchlight in a story about escape. My heart knocked like someone on the other side of the world trying to get in. Mason watched my face change. What? My mother, I said. Someone wants me to know she took a detour. He nodded like he'd expected it all along. Men always want to change the subject, he said. They think it keeps the object from changing them. We parted near the bend where Zeke reappeared from not existing, looking at me like a man who wanted to help and knew the limits built around the desire. You okay? He asked, and the question fell between us, with an answer that could not be given in public. "I have a map," I said, holding the ledger in my head, and the text on my screen, and the sound of a lock turning on tape. "And a door," he said. "And a wall," I said. "And a question about Alabama," he added. We stood there in the heat long enough to make a choice. The cicadas sang like a stadium. The river went on doing what rivers do, carry and erase and keep. "Tomorrow," I said. "Tomorrow," Zeke agreed, and the words sounded both like a promise and a cliff. I drove home with the windows down and the radio off, letting the air fill the car with everything it knew. The magnolia in front of the house had shed 2 flowers in the storm, white petals bruised brown at the edges, beautiful even in failure. On the porch steps, a small envelope waited like a thought I'd left behind. Inside was a single photograph. My mother, 19, standing in front of a church that was not Mount Olive, pregnant enough that the dress couldn't hide it, smile thin and defiant. In the lower right corner, written in a familiar, decisive hand, were 4 words that changed the shape of the road between here and wherever she'd gone. First Missionary Tyrus, Alabama. I looked up, and the street was empty, and the house was very quiet, and the skillet sat on the stove like an answer you prayed would be enough. The photograph of my mother burned a hole in the quiet. Her belly was round, her smile sharp, her eyes the kind of tired you can only get from being young and running out of places to run. First Missionary Tyrus, Alabama. I sat on the porch steps with the cicadas hammering their war song and let the picture fold me in half. I had always known my mother left Magnolia. I hadn't known she detoured. And I hadn't known she carried me in her belly when she did. The street was empty, but it was the kind of empty that holds secrets. I tucked the photograph into the back of Pearl's ledger, as if the past deserved to sit together. Zeke came by before dusk, carrying a thermos of coffee that smelled like burnt beans and stubbornness. He sat on the porch without asking, poured into 2 enamel mugs. "Alabama," I said, showing him the photograph. He studied it, his thumb brushing the handwritten words in the corner. "Tyrus," he said, as if tasting the syllables. "Small town. Mill shut down in the 80s. Sheriff's office worked out of a trailer. If your mama stopped there, she stopped where nobody would ask too many questions. Why write this now?" I asked. "Why leave it for me?" "Because you asked," Zeke said simply. "Then because you wouldn't stop." We sipped in silence. The cicadas quieted, replaced by the frogs. Magnolia trees leaned into the night. Tomorrow loomed, a wall with a crack waiting to be widened. At dawn, the church parking lot glistened with dew. Mason waited near the fellowship hall door with a crowbar that had seen too much use in too many summers. His Lakers shirt was fresh, as if he thought clean fabric could keep old sins from clinging. "You sure?" he asked. "No," I said, "but that doesn't change anything." Zeke stood at the corner of the lot, close enough to be called, far enough to let me keep my promise. He gave me a look that meant both be careful, and I'm right here. Mason's hands shook only once before he braced the crowbar in the seam of the patched wall. The sound of concrete surrendering filled the basement, splinters of plaster falling like dust shaken from a hymn book. The hole widened, a wound reopened. The air that seeped through was colder than it should have been, damp and old. I pressed my sleeve to my mouth against the smell. Mason dropped the crowbar with a clatter. Inside the wall were bones. Small, partial, jumbled. Not one body, not 2. The outlines of girls pressed into concrete and time. Mary Alice, Lola, Cora Jean. The silence pressed so hard on my chest, I thought I'd break. Mason crossed himself. I clutched Pearl's ledger like it was scripture. "They left them here," I whispered. "They worshipped above them," Mason said. My phone trembled in my hand as I raised it to take a picture. The lens shook, my breath fogging the image, but I caught what mattered, the proof that Pearl's voice had not been in vain. "We call Olivia," I said, the decision wrapping around my voice like armor. By the time Olivia Price arrived with county officials, the churchyard was crowded. Deputies stood stiff, church mothers clutched purses like lifelines, and Lionel Avery paced like a man betrayed. "This is sacred ground," he protested, sweat staining his collar. "You desecrated digging up." "Desecration," Olivia cut in, her voice iron under velvet, "is putting children in a wall and singing over them." Cameras clicked. Reporters smelled blood. The sheriff himself arrived, red-faced, with the expression of a man dragged into light against his will. "We'll handle this internally," he said. "No," Olivia replied, holding up my photograph and Pearl's ledger. "This is evidence. This is history. And this time, it's not getting buried." The crowd murmured, voices swelling like a tide. Ruthie Mae pressed a hand to her chest, tears running free. Naomi stood tall at the edge, jaw locked, her sister's name finally called out in public. Lionel's eyes found mine. His smile was gone, replaced by something darker. "You don't know what you've done," he hissed. "I know exactly what I've done," I said. I listened. That night, after statements and tape and photographs, I sat at the house under the magnolia tree. Zeke leaned against the porch rail, tired but watchful. "They'll fight it," he said. "They'll say the bones are too old, the evidence too thin. They'll say Lonnie took it all to the grave. But you cracked it open. You gave the girls back their names." I thought of Cora Jean's voice on tape, pure and unafraid. I thought of Pearl's handwriting circling my mother's face. I thought of the way silence had sat in this town for decades, fat and fed, until someone dragged it out to starve. "They'll come for me," I said. "They already did," Zeke answered. "And you're still here." A week later, I drove to Tyrus, Alabama. The church in the photograph stood tired and half-collapsed, vines gripping the steeple. I asked the few elders still around about my mother. One remembered her. A girl with fire in her eyes, heavy with child, singing in the choir one summer to earn money before vanishing north. She said she had to keep moving, the old woman told me. Said if she stopped, the past would catch her. But she looked like she wanted roots, too. I touched the warped pew where my mother once sat and felt the quiet settle. Roots, I thought, are sometimes inherited whether you want them or not. When I came home, the magnolia had dropped another flower. I pressed it between the pages of Pearl's ledger. On Sunday, I walked into Mount Olive Missionary Baptist Church. Not for forgiveness, not for peace, but to sit in the pew, ledger in my bag, and remind the walls that someone was still listening. The choir sang. I closed my eyes and heard Cora Jean's voice braid with theirs, at last lifted up where it belonged. Outside, the magnolia tree stood stubborn against the sky. The girls were named. The wall was broken. The song remained. And I, Pearl's granddaughter, my mother's daughter, was not leaving. Not this time.